This is my I think third or fourth convention I went to in St. John, and they're always good. A lot of friendly people up there. Okay, all right. Typical convention, all of the standard elements in the convention. But one of the tricks I find is after making a decision to go, register early because you're usually going to get some advantage on. Sometimes it's the hotel room, sometimes it's the operating sessions, sometimes there's some limited clinics that you're going to need to sign up for. So if you decide to go, sign up early. I pestered them and finally got to be, I think, the first guy to register in the United States. So for Tom, living down in Exeter, New Hampshire, this was a 371-mile trek up to St. John. He stopped at my house and then we drove up. Now, when he stopped at my house, he had a wonderful present for me because I'd been in Florida up until a few days earlier. And I came back and look at all those nice warehouses that were going to go onto my layout in the basement, which we're going to talk about in the next presentation. But Tom, yeah, some of them are starch. One of them is a starch warehouse and one of them is a fertilizer warehouse. So let's But yeah, if you don't see vents on the top, you see these two lower right ones. Those are starch warehouses. They don't have vents on top. We stayed at the Best Western up there, and we had the most favorable rates you can imagine, 75 cents US to the Canadian dollar. So by the time we left, after 3-night stay, each of us had spent only less than $200 each. Very economical. So the industry tours, there are 3 major types. This is not a picture of a tour I took. In fact, I didn't take any of the industry tours, but there were 3 available. One was the Port of St. John. Now, Tom and I on our own did drive around there, and it is a massive port, and it's being improved all the time. In the summertime, a lot of cruise ships come in there. Irving Pulp and Paper opened up. Jeff Anthony, I don't know if he's on the line, but I know he took one of the industry tours and thought highly of it. Also, a lot of rail sightseeing opportunities, New Brunswick Southern around there. In the conventions in the past, we had some coach rides, but not this year. Now, I just want to set the setting here. This is in the middle of the last century. This is what the track plan looked like in New Brunswick. And to give you some perspective, that's the upper northeast corner of the state of Maine and Van Buren. We had an international bridge across that came from the Bangor and Aroostook Railroad, my favorite railroad, over to the Canadian National at St. Leonard. And there's my hometown of Fort Fairfield, just across the border from Perth Andover. And that line you see there is the Canadian Pacific line. It came into Fort Fairfield in the 1870s. It beat the Bangor and Aroostook by about a quarter of a century. Now, I'm also going to give you a couple other references to the 1950 era. Carleton County was roughly a triangular shaped county in that part of New Brunswick. And Steve McMullen has a wonderful layout based upon potato production in that area. And down here we have Hampton to St. Martin was a rural line that was existent in the 40s and 50s. And another layout was based upon that prototype. But as typical in the 50s, a lot of railroads running through the territory until they didn't need them anymore. This is more modern view of the rail lines in New Brunswick today. And this line now is no longer the Bangor and Aroostook, you all know. This is actually owned by a Canadian, actually the track is owned by the state of Maine, and the railroad is run by a New Brunswick rail company. It's called New Brunswick Northern, Maine Northern, I think it's called, yeah. So, and we have learned that St. John Port is expecting to have so much more freight in it in the future. It will have an effect probably also in the United States at Brownville Junction, where they bring things in from both northern Maine and from St. John and connect with the CSX line now. Northern Maine Junction, which was one of the biggest interchange places in the state, is relatively inactive these days, just outside of Bangor. This is another more modern schematic of the rail systems. You can see over here, Halifax, Nova Scotia is the biggest port on the Atlantic for the Canadians. and they connect up here in Moncton, New Brunswick, and then the CN lines take them into Canada. Here again, these lines are relatively active. What we're going to be talking about in my next clinic is this little area right here, which is the Fort Fairfield branch of the former Bangor and Aroostook Railroad. We'll also be talking about Oakfield, Holton, Millinocket, and down to Northern Main Junction, just to give you a connection to the next presentation. So, operations, one of my favorite activities, as you'll hear time and time again. And there are two layouts available for operating this time. I've operated on one of them before. This one I hadn't operated on before, but this is Lou McIntyre, his Ampton and St. Martin's Railway. And Lou is one of the organizers of the convention. Did a great job, very friendly guy, and a great modeler, taking a rural railroad and really recreating some good modeling scenes. Here's Tom Oxnard, one of our newest and most capable operators in the division. He has more skills than just building the models. Tom is throwing Lou had almost all of these switches hand throws, so you did have to reach up and throw them. And that's what he's doing there. Dave Inslee was with us this night. This gentleman here is from Quebec. And then this guy over here looking pretty dumb, listening to Lou. After Tom ran a through train, then he came back and paired up with Dave Inslee to run a local conductor, engineer type. A lot of fun. But as you can see, a lot of detail, a lot of extraction and farming, agricultural scenes, logging scenes, two-deck layout largely, and a seaport at the end. Here's an agricultural scene. Now, these are not the type of potato warehouses. Actually, they call them in Aroostook County potato houses. I throw the word warehouse out just to make sure everybody's on the same page. But you're going to see some better potato warehouses in the next presentation. Supposedly, potato crop, horse-drawn harvesting situation, barrels on the truck, a little out of scale, but nice logging scene over here. I did not criticize this to Lou, by the way, but I had those thoughts in mind. Another scene, agricultural scene, field here. Canada did, and it runs it because I grew up in neighboring part of Maine, and the Canadians did tend to use horses much later than American farmers did. My memory in the 50s, there was no American farmer using horse-drawn equipment in the fields, but in Canada, some still did. Next layout was Steve McMullen's layout. It's a fictional model railroad based upon the Carleton County, New Brunswick, which I mentioned to you. It's a three-decker, largely, and greatly expanded since the last time I was there. We had a great crew this night, all happy faces at the end of the night. I happened to pick a new scene on the layout. I was the South Newbridge yard master. This is not the yard itself. This is one of the industries along the perimeter of it that I had to also take care of. Just a great operating. If you read my article in the newsletter, you know how much fun I had here. Here is the South Newbridge yard. This is the area where the trains were dropped off or made up. It was a stub end. And this is the through track here. Steve had this choreographed very, very well. I was busy evenly throughout the night. Furthermore, I did not hold up anybody unnecessarily. I was able to accomplish all my tasks before each train needed the cars from me, or I could take the cars from their train. Now, Steve claims that this is the world's largest HO scale potato field. And I'm going to tell him, I told him, Steve, you're going to get no competition from me because I can't afford to spend that much space on a potato field. I got track delay so I can do operations. But then Steve had the audacity in a clinic to say that Carleton County, New Brunswick, was at one time the world's largest potato producing county. Well, we know that's not true, folks. We know that's not true. It's Aroostook County. Aroostook County. Look at the size difference. And these two maps are pretty much exactly on scale with each other. So Carleton County, Aroostook County. Now, Aroostook County did not have all that land and potatoes. a lot of that, 90% of that is in the forest, but still, we claim to be a much larger potato producing town. We had 9 layouts available for the touring, and they were well bunched. Tom and I went to Steve Hill's, and he was famous for 3D printing. Had a wonderful example of the machine there, and lots of new products he had made. This structure here, he made in a number of parts and then put them together. Each of those big parts, though, was 3D printed. He even printed labels on his fascia, which is pretty thing. Now, he had just started, I think, Tom, within 2 years making this layout. Yeah, so he'd had something before, but look at the fascia, and this is going to be fine cabinetry.
Stay fine.
It's looking good, though, isn't it, Sage? It's looking good. His earlier models were scratch built conventionally or sometimes kit bashed, but now he's relying mostly on 3D printing for his new stuff. Then we met Bob Boyce. He's an architect by trade. He loves history, and he loved to take pictures from the era he wanted to model and then convert them into structures and scenes on his layout. Here he's showing a 1972 map of Port St. John to Tom. And this is the area that he was referring to. Some of these buildings in here he built many, many years ago, but all to scale. It's hard to get a great picture of him, but take it from us, he was a great structure builder. We had a plethora of clinics to go to. In fact, of all the conventions I've been over to New Brunswick, this one was the one that had the most clinics. Various topics. Tom mentioned Ron Grand Maison's clinic, where he talked about the using N-scale details on the roof instead of HO scale sized roof ornaments. This is Greg Williams. Tom learned a lot about Arduinos in this clinic. You want to mention anything about that, Tom?
Talking about Arduinos and Greg's next one on just electric circuits and introducing us to all circuits. And that's my weakest point. So I think I need to hear this time and time again. And for $10, we got parts to a kit, and we put these together step by step. Great fun with the breadboard and the 555 timer and capacitors and LEDs, and so great fun.
And our illustrious former leader of the NER, John Doring, was there. John alerted me a few months before the thing he was going to come up and tell everybody up there about how great the NMRA was doing. I alerted him that there had been a very unhappy divorce from the NMRA by many of the people in New Brunswick 20 or so years ago. And I said, wear your flak vest and be careful of what you speak. But knowing John and his talent, he gave it, and you heard him speak, Tom, right? Tom, you went to this clinic by Kevin Rudko from Edmonton, Alberta.
Kevin Rudko came all the way from Alberta, Canada, and he has been in business as Signal Logic Systems for the last 10 plus years, and I've never heard of it, but he has a nice array of products and whole signal systems for your layout and road crossing, warning signals with gates, and so I'm interested in purchasing something from him. But if you get online on Signal Logic Systems, he's got a wonderful, he produces all the electronics under the layout, not on top. So not the gates or the lights, but everything underneath.
Sorry, thank you, Jim. And we talked a little bit about Steve Hill. He did the 3D printing clinic. Greg Williams, Tom talked about the Arduino and electric circuit devices. He's from Canterbury, New Brunswick, which is also near the Aroostook County border. And here's Ron Grand Maison, former school teacher like Bob Bennett, and as artfully a presenter. And then we kind of had the surprise guy. This guy, Rich Mahaney, is from Canton, Michigan. He has a bucket load of clinic presentations he takes all around the country. He's been to almost every state in the union giving an NMRA convention clinic. He gave 6 at this convention and was happy to give more if they wanted it. Now, we got a little secret here. He's not been able to give a clinic yet in New Hampshire. So he's got to check off New Hampshire. So maybe, Glenn, we'll have him for our 2025 convention. Here's the place where the public train show was. Very appropriately sized and very comfortable place. A lot of vendors. But most importantly, they had a lot of clubs that brought in their mobile and set up their mobile things. And I'm always impressed with the quality of these modules that they bring. This one Tom is talking to is the counterpart to Justin McGuire's system of building very lightweight modules, almost like an airplane wing substructure. But they're from Prince Edward Island, I believe, Tom. Is that right? Prince Edward Island? Yeah, Atlantic Canada somewhere. Yeah. And in the last convention, Justin McGuire's people did bring their stuff up and they had a joint layout. But just kind of look, I don't think I took a good enough picture in this one, but you know there's a backdrop in there somewhere, right? And you know there's an actual model there somewhere. Where do they meet? Several examples in there, and I probably did not capture this well, but several examples of the backdrop and the surface of the layout just blended in very, very nicely. Our friendly editor, Jeff Anthony, with another friend from our convention who was with us one night on operations, enjoying another nice scene there. Dave Varasa from Long Island or Rhode Island, Long Island. Yeah. Yeah. Now, this is the contest area. You have to be a member of the Maritime Federation of Model Railroads. So Tom put his money down, became a member, and then entered his contest model there. And Tom got to vote. You only can vote if you're a member of that organization. By the way, that organization is the one that got set up in contrast to the NMRA. So there's a tension between the two organizations still existing after 20 some years. But look at the guys with the clipboards. They are pondering these models very, very carefully. In fact, this guy, I think, is looking at Jeff Anthony's entry, the sawdust-filled hopper car, or wood chip car. Thank you. Now, look at this wonderful example of a chemical plant. And look at that wonderful model right beside it. This is Tom's entry, the Nicholas Chemical Company. And if you don't notice already, take a look at the Nicholas Chemical Company. Is always thinking forward in the future. PFAs, the wave of the future. And dioxin, a great herbicide. Boy, did they know what was coming up, huh? But Tom's model was built with spare parts that he left over. The inside of the building also had equipment in it. Some of the equipment we might not recognize because it was kind of pretend equipment, but this is all going to go on to Tom's grandson Pender's layout that Tom and Pender have been working on. So then we went to the banquet at the Riverside Country Club, a beautiful view over the river. Dave Inslee, his wife and mother were there with us at the table. And his mother, by the way, grew up in the St. John area. So they went back, kind of a homecoming thing. There's John Doring and Ed Ozlowski from the western part of the NER, and Tom, the northern director of the NER. And then we have our editor, Jeff Anthony, and some bozo that snuck in there to eat with him. But as expected, and I would have bet many, many thousands of dollars in this one, Tom wins the best in the show for his entry. And he's getting presented the trophy here. Tom has won this before. This is his second time to win it. The first time they let him take it out of the country. And he had to struggle to find a place in his home to put such a tall trophy where it could be seen without being obnoxious. And this time it came to the attention of the judges that Larry Cannon, who was the shuttle guy who would take the trophy back each year, was no longer around to serve that way. So they said, well, we're not going to let it out of the country this time, Tom, but we will send you a plaque to hang on your wall. Tom has not got the plaque yet. So that was the Fundy Rail Fest. Tom and I had a blast. First of all, we have the socialization between us, ride up, ride back. I can't imagine why people are not more often going to conventions. They're fun, and always can find new ideas, new resources, new things to do. So Tom and I strongly urge everybody, if you see a convention coming up, give it serious consideration. Find a buddy or two or three or four or whatever, and sign up for it and go.